All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. Cowboys get some massive news ahead of the Week 5 matchup, has big implications in the short term and long term. We'll talk about everything that means. But first, as we always like to on this channel, get things started with a little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. And I got a little bit of an eye chart here for you that I saw on social media, but I thought it's interesting. So this graphic right here on the screen shows the homegrown drafted players on active rosters, working left to right. You've got the most the Baltimore Ravens to the least the Tennessee Titans, right? You can see the Dallas Cowboys sit right there in the middle, right, a little bit above average. And if you're kind of looking for a trend here, it seems a lot of the better teams in football have a lot more homegrown players, but there are some exceptions. For example, the Detroit Lions don't have a lot of homegrown players. Washington, which was good last year and seemed to be somewhat decent this year, also has very few. The Vikings, which always seem to be feisty and competitive year after year, despite having quarterback continuity issues, also have very few. And the Bears, we don't know how good they are going to be, but there certainly seem to be a team on the upswing, also have very few as well. So there isn't a whole lot of correlation here. I think the thing that's most interesting to me is if you look at the championship kind of teams, you look at, for example, the Philadelphia Eagles, I'll even throw the Rams and the Packers and, of course, the Chiefs into that mix. They certainly lean toward more homegrown players, excuse me. But I think a big part of that may be when you have an expensive quarterback or when you paid a quarterback more dollars, you have to rely on more draft picks. So I think the fact that the Dallas Cowboys are in the middle of the road right here is actually an interesting situation. I'm kind of curious what it means going forward, right? Because they have the cap space, so they may actually rely on less on homegrown players, but they also have multiple first-round picks. So it's going to be a weird situation here where Dallas has a great opportunity in front of them, where a lot of the teams with the expensive quarterbacks you can see on this list here, you look at the Ravens with Jackson, the Bengals with Burrow, Rams with Stafford, of course the Eagles with Hurts, the Bills with Josh Allen. They have to rely on draft picks and homegrown players because they just don't have the money for a lot of players. The Cowboys have a little bit more money, more cap space upcoming to make some veteran players, but at the same time, they also have that extra draft capital. So the Cowboys are in a really good position. I think that's a takeaway from a Cowboys perspective from this graphic, because unlike the other teams that have expensive veteran quarterback deals, the Cowboys actually have some cap space to get some veterans, and they've already used some. You can see the Cowboys, it's not like they're top 5, top 10 in terms of homegrown players. They went out and got some veterans, right? Pickens comes to mind as the most prominent example of one. But when you look at the Cowboys going forward, they get both bites at the apple. They can use all their first round picks, obviously 2 more from the Packers, and obviously some more cap space. So they're in a very unique position going forward, and I think that's a good sign. All right, let's get into the news. Big news of the day was a lot of injury updates as we get ready for Week 5, and this is courtesy of Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star Telegram. Great follow if you're looking for one on X. Cowboys game report versus the Jets. Out, wide receiver CeeDee Lamb with the ankle. That's not surprising at all. Tyler Guyton with the concussion. That was sort of a long shot. Concussion protocol is tough. I mean, it's a multi-gate process. A 1 week miss with a concussion is sort of almost the standard. It's almost shocking to have a guy leave a game with a concussion on Sunday and then come back the following Sunday. I mean, especially consider the fact that he would have to fly out. Right, it's one thing if the game was at home and maybe they could have another day to evaluate, but it's like, listen, we're not going to have a guy fly out depending on where he is in the concussion protocol. There's no point in having him fly out there if he's only at like gate 5 of the whatever 10 steps to get through the concussion protocol. So not too surprising there. Malik Hooker with a toe injury. Again, that was expected. Kevontae Turpin and Tyler Booker. Booker obviously expected. Turpin, there was a little bit of hope, but really the expectation is now he's going to miss a couple weeks. The questionable list is where things get a little bit interesting. Tyler Smith with that knee, it's reportedly tendonitis in his knee. That's an interesting one, and that, of course, would be a big injury because he's obviously a very good football player, and the Cowboys obviously have a lot of other injuries on the offensive line. Their depth is already being stretched a little bit, although to be fair, if you look at the Cowboys O-line injuries, right, with BB obviously out, you look at with Booker obviously out, but Hoffman as a starting center, he's done well. I mean, I go back to before the draft saying, listen, I wasn't against Hoffman competing to be the starting right guard long term. So for him starting as a center again, I think is not terrible. Bass is competent as a backup, but you're going to get in the National Football League. And then, of course, you look at Nate Thomas at left tackle, a guy who actually subbed in for Terrence Steele before the Guyton injury to get some reps because the Cowboys weren't happy with Terrence Steele on some plays. So Nate Thomas getting more opportunities. Remember, Nate Thomas spent the entire training camp after Guyton got hurt in training camp playing left tackle. So he's got a lot of experience. So excited to see what he does there. So when you look at the 3 injuries with the Cowboys in terms of those positions on the offensive line, as bad as it is to be beat up, I think those are sort of, there's a lot of things to take from that, far from the end of the world. Tyler Smith injury is a little bit of a different story, of course. Will he play? Will he not play? It's hard to tell. I think tendonitis it tends to be a pain management and a long-term aggravation issue. And the fact that he's flying to New York, I think is a little bit of an indicator, right? If you have a lower body injury or a back injury and you're getting on a plane and flying to a road game, to me that makes me think the team really believes he has a chance of playing, like a really good chance, right? I don't think you get a guy who's, we don't really know, but we want to see if he may be able to play. I don't think you put him on a plane and send him to New York. Maybe I'm wrong, but especially if it's a lower body injury, right? It's different if it's like a elbow or something or a shoulder, right? Or a chest or something where it's like, whether you're sitting on a plane or sitting at home, it doesn't matter. But to go through traveling and stuff like that, I mean, anyone who's ever traveled, and I've traveled, with a pulled hamstring once. My God, that was like the worst day ever, right? It just made me feel miserable for like another week. I don't think you put a player who has a lower body injury through travel unless you think they have a good chance of playing. No, it doesn't mean he will play, of course. It probably will be a game time decision, and they'll have to evaluate over the weekend. But I do think, you don't put a guy on a plane if you don't think he's going to play or has a good chance of playing. And it's the same thing with Nealand and Murray. Nealand, I think, was interestingly enough, was a guy that kind of showed up. But based on reporting that was like in the locker room, he didn't look hurt. He didn't look banged up at all. Very interesting. He may be one of these guys that ends up being a scratch, potentially just a guy who doesn't get on the active roster for the game day for whatever reason. I mean, it could be, in the knee injury could be a little bit of an excuse. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Kenneth Murray, right? He was a guy who got banged up at the end of the Packers game. He's been limited in practice all week, but I feel like he's going to play. Very similar reason for Smith. Miles Sanders, it's kind of up in the air. I think he probably will play. I think he'll be limited, though, maybe in some third down pass protection situations. And then obviously Jaden Blue is going to make his debut. And then we have Carson and Mingo. Those are two interesting ones. I think Carson's probably a no. Mingo is interesting because of obviously the injury to Turpin. So it becomes sort of an act here how it goes. So if Turpin and Sanders can't play, then I think Jaden Blue takes, for example, Sanders' roster spot, and then you have a guy like Mingo get elevated to take Turpin's roster spot. I mean, there's some levers to pull here, and I think that's why it's going to be very interesting right before game time what the Cowboys do. Definitely something to keep an eye on. But it's undeniable the Cowboys are really, really beat up, right? I mean, this is a long list of injuries, guys, and for it to be so early in the season, it reminds me so much of last year of how just so early on. I remember after I think it was after the Giants game, they left New York, and there's Brandon Cooks out for a long period of time. And you're just like, great, right? Obviously, their left tackle was already injured. That's why they had to start Guyton to begin with. That was not ideal. Then you look over defensive side of the football. Deron Bland obviously had been hurt for a long time. He'd be out and continue to be out. Then you look at DeMarcus Lawrence. You looked at Micah Parsons, Sam Williams, and then Marshawn Nealon got hurt like the first quarter against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it became just an avalanche of injuries off the rip, right? Week 4, week 5 for Dallas last year, and very much the same kind of thing here this year for Dallas. But I will say, the one good news is, I remember last year defensively, they were bringing up practice squad guys. They were bringing up guys just off the street to start, or playing 40, 50 snaps a game on defensive end, for example. They would do that at corner as well. Remember, Oyearwriye, the corner, the Dallas ended up having to start a lot of games and play a lot of football games. He basically was a practice squad, not even on the Cowboys roster, and he was elevated and just had to be thrown into the mix. So that was a different situation to what we see today with Dallas, right? A lot of these guys, not all, but a lot of these guys, right, have been on the roster. Flournoy's been here a couple years, right? He played a lot down the stretch last week against Green Bay and the week before against the Bears since CeeDee Lamb's injury, right? You look at Jaden Blue making his debut, but he's a talented rookie, explosive guy. He's a guy the Cowboys have wanted to get on the football field. Now with some injuries, they'll give him a really good chance to get on the field. So you look at the rest of these depth across the board. The one that really stinks to me is Tyler Smith, but even if you look at Marshawn Nealon, right? Hey, listen, does Ezra Aku get more reps? Awesome. I'm all for it. Nothing against Elon, but heck, let's take it. Clowney get more reps? Cool. Kenneth Murray, a little banged up. Let's get Shamar James and Maris Leofound more opportunities. So it feels a little bit different with these injuries, right? These still stink, and the Cowboys are obviously going into this road game really beat up in a tough situation against a desperate football team. So this is going to be a challenging game, right? As every game is, and as every game will be, certainly with this Dallas Cowboys squad, the injuries make things a lot worse. But I do think you look at some of these injuries and say, look, you're not throwing in guys that won't play in the NFL. Like last year in 2024, and I'm just going to harp on this point one more time, the Cowboys were forced to play guys due to injuries that would be no part of their future at all. No one looked at Oyearwriye or Houston at defensive end or any of the other guys that they pulled off. Not Houston, I'm sorry. It was, who was it? Was it Houston? It was number 55. Gosh, he played for the Bengals. I forget his name. I'm going to have to, let me look that up real quick, guys, while I'm talking to you guys. Jeez, is it Maybe someone can correct me in the comment section below here. Carl Lawson, not Houston. Thank you. Jeez. Oh, boy. I was confusing it with Houston there for a second. But they had to play Carl Lawson, for example, a guy that just pulled off of the street, who had no part of the Cowboys' long-term plans, right? And they were having to start and play these guys. This year, when the Cowboys have injuries, they're playing guys like Nate Thomas, who are part of their long-term plan. Hoffman and Bass are long-term backups. Jaden Blue is part of their long-term plan, right? Flanoy might be, right? It's one of those things, like Shamar James, Maris Leofau might be, right? Wanye Thomas, that's defensive back, might be. So again, it's as bad as it is to be beat up, it's one of these things where at least the guys that are playing are guys who are part of a medium to long-term plan, whereas in 2024, they're just throwing random guys on the street just to fill a roster. So I will take some solace in that, even though it stinks to be this beat up. All right, more news here. This is courtesy of John Machota, and I think this is an important statement here. This is just more evidence of what I've been saying for a long time now. Cowboys Executive Vice President Stephen Jones on 105.3 The Fan on a realistic goal for Dallas' struggling defense this season. I think it's going to be a damn good defense. We feel like we have good players. We've got more good players that are going to join this defense, and I have all the confidence in the world that we're going to have a good defense before this year is out. Just a quick sidebar, it's someone correct me that it's defense, not defense, right? And I try my best to be correct there, so I'm going to get that wrong about 90% of the time, but I'm going to be that guy, at least for now, to pronounce it defense until I revert to pronouncing it incorrectly, probably in 30 seconds. But you'll notice what Jones is saying here, and I think this is very, very important. When you go back to this, the last sentence there, and have all the confidence in the world that we're going to have a good defense before this year is out. Right? By the end of the season, we'll be a good defense, right? And what he's saying there is that the plan for this Cowboys team is not for 2025, right? He's not saying by September, by October. Listen, if by the end of the year the defense is good and you finish, I don't know, with 4 or 5 wins or whatever, there's going to be a lot of unhappy people. But the Cowboys are just screaming as loud as they can. They do it every single day, it feels like, whether it's Schottenheimer, one of the assistants, or people in the front office, that they're building for the future. By the end of the season, we're going to be good, right? Listen, maybe if you're sneaking into a wild card round, cool. But, I mean, look, if that's the goal usually for most teams. If you listen to most teams, they say something, hey, we're focusing on this week only. We're only going to focus on this week. The Cowboys, to a man, have been talking about development, getting better every week to the point of playing better football at the end of the season and in the future. They are so future focused. And it's not like they're trying to win every single Sunday. They certainly are. But every move they've made, every single move they've made has been predicated on one goal, and that's getting better for the long term. And it all started with the Parsons trade. Really, it all started with the Schottenheimer hire, but it really got accelerated with the Parsons trade. And I tell this to everybody that'll listen. If you look at what the Cowboys are doing, everything they're doing is set up for the future, right? And I think that's really important to have that context all the time when you look at the moves the Cowboys are making. All right, this next report is from Nick Harris, again at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. This was kind of a funny story. Cowboys running back Jaden Blue debuted new Louis Vuitton Nike cleats at practice on Thursday. Okay. And head coach Brian Scheimer laughed in, saying it was a questionable decision. About halfway through practice, I saw him laying. I said, "What the hell happened to Blue?" He said, "Coach, I'm fine. I got blisters." And I said, "Oh, shocker. Look at the cool shoes you got." Blue changed out of his shoes, and the blisters got better. There's no concerns about his game availability. For the record, yeah, anyone who's freaking out about blisters affecting Blue for the game is, listen, I've played college football and nowhere near NFL, of course, FCS level, but blisters are nothing, right? Everyone's had blisters and cuts and lacerations. This is absolutely nothing. But there is something good about this, and I will highlight something I like. I like when an exciting sort of playmaking, running back or receiver or tight end has a little bit of, an eccentric side. A little bit of you want to be a little weird, right? A little bit different. Right, if you're going to be a spark plug, I want you to be just a little bit of a spark plug, not just on the field with the ball in your hands, but kind of just by demeanor, by style. I want to be a guy that when you get in the huddle, it feels different, right? I played with guys that are like this. They're a little wired a little bit differently, and when they get involved in the game, or even in practice for that matter, it just feels different. There's a different energy. There's a different buzz. That's what I want from rookies, especially, but definitely young playmakers when to put in to be like a spark, to add a little juice. I kind of like that from Jaden Blue. I like the fact he thinks a little different with the Louis Vuitton cleats, right? And there's been other reports of this similar kind of ilk, right? He's just kind of got what do the kids say? He's got a different kind of aura to him, right? So it's one of those things where I kind of like it, right? I like running backs and playmakers and these spark plugs to have a little juice to them. I think it's a good thing. All right, next report here, a little bit lengthy, but going back to the Trayvon Diggs situation a few days ago, per John Machota, the Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer on not starting Trayvon Diggs last Sunday and how he has responded. He's been awesome. The conversation we had was interesting. I shared my opinion. He shared his opinion. We agreed to disagree on some things, but man, just the way he's responded, the way he played in that game, fantastic player. I've been blown away by his work this week and how well he's been doing. That's what I love about him. I get mad at my kids all the time, and they still love me, and I still love Trayvon. On Diggs talking to Matt Eberflus about playing more man coverage. We don't think that we have all the answers. The guys that play the game are so important, so impactful that absolutely I talk about scheme with all of our players a lot. I understand that. We're trying to grow. Just a quick pause here. Again, going back to the report earlier, the Cowboys scream from the rooftops like at least once a day. We're trying to get better for the long term, right? They just scream all the time that this is their plan, this is their goal. Pay attention, guys. I know a lot of people get short-term mindset during the season, and I get it, but just every single member of the Cowboys staff, coaching staff, front office, hey, we're trying to get better for the long term. They just keep yelling it out loud. Anyway, the report goes on to say, we have not been playing great, but it's not just because we've been playing zone defense. I would be really pissed off if our players felt something and didn't come sit down with me and say, hey, Shotty, I think we should be doing this. Does that mean we're going to do it? No, not necessarily, but I'm going to listen. Yeah, so this is really good leadership right here, and this is a really good answer publicly as well. So I'm going to give Schottenheimer a lot of credit. I do love the fact that the way he frames this as the players, he'll listen to him the way he'll listen to his kids, but he's the guy in charge, right? The coaching staff is the guy in charge. And sometimes he'll get mad at him. He says, but yeah, like I get mad at my kids, right? Notice the little framing there. It leaves no doubt who's in charge, right? Listen, if you're anyone out there with kids knows, especially older kids, my daughter's tiny, so it's not quite the same thing. But I'm sure anyone who has older kids will tell you, yeah, you may listen every once in a while, but you're in charge. Parents are in charge. Dad's in charge. That's the vibe that Shotty's giving here. That's the framing. It's like, listen, I'll listen to Diggs. And we'll agree to disagree, and I want his input. I want the players' input. Of course I do. But I'm in charge, right? And I love the way Diggs has responded. He's doing great. I love his attitude, right? So he does that double framing here. He says, Diggs is doing great. He's awesome, but I'm in charge. That is really good framing from Schottenheimer. And again, it speaks to a lot of what his dad was like. His dad was a guy who, very sort of emotional, worked with players, developed players, was very, very tough and demanding, but also was, side by side with them, in the trenches kind of thing. When they were at their lowest, he picked them up kind of thing. He always was building up his players. Brian Schottenheimer falls from under that same mold right here so far with what we've seen from the Cowboys. And look, I kind of like it, right? Because if you look at some of these players, you do need to be tough on them, and you need to come and say, listen, I'm in charge. I think with Mike McCarthy, and certainly with Jason Garrett, and definitely with Wade Phillips, there's a little bit of inmates running the asylum at times. And look, not that Mike McCarthy wasn't a tough guy and a good coach, but there were a lot of reports that, he kind of would acquiesce to the players, and, he would let the veterans control a lot of the team. He felt like that was the best recipe for success, right? And I don't know if that's all true or not. That's just sort of the rumors or the rumblings. Schottenheimer says, listen, I'll listen to you. The way I listen to my kids doesn't mean you run the show. And that framing, I think, is so important because, again, it's a way to keep the players also, set the bar, right? Listen, I'll give you the time of day. Come by my office. We'll talk strategy and scheme. I want your input, which is also true. I think as a coach, as a leader, you should want the input of these guys just to see what they have to say, just to see what they're feeling. But just like my dad, just like being a dad to my kids, I'm in charge here. I love that framing. I love that approach. But it also speaks to another element too, right? Because there's no one who wants more for their kids to succeed than their fathers. Just like Schottenheimer, again, that relationship here with the players, the coach to player relationship, and I think it builds a little bit of trust. Right? You didn't get that with McCarthy, definitely not with Garrett, and of course not with Wade Phillips. The last coach you probably got that with was Bill Parcells. Now, Parcells was much more disciplinarian, but people forget he was the guy that at times, certainly in private, would just be like the ultimate sort of building a player up when they were at their lowest, right? He was the guy that would do it. Parcells was always the guy to bring players down when they felt they were good and then really build them up, at least in private, when they were down and low, right? Phil Simms, of course, talks about it all the time on CBS. And I think Schottenheimer, much closer to his dad in this approach, but very similar in how he works with players. He's in charge, right? But he still is able to work and listen with the players and respect that relationship. And I think from that perspective, what he's doing with Diggs, who, by the way, Trayvon Diggs is a guy who's always kind of been this way. And the Cowboys just kind of let him, right? Same thing with Micah Parsons, by the way. And I think having a coach who's, again, this framing, I'm in charge, but I'll listen, I think is good. I think it's needed for a lot of these veterans on the team, especially guys like Diggs. All right, next report here is also courtesy of John Machota, very active today in the reporting game. Machota's fantastic, by the way, if you're looking for a guy to follow as well. Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer is not expecting wide receiver CeeDee Lamb or Tyler Booker to play Sunday, as we already mentioned, but it doesn't sound like they're far from returning. They're both moving around good. I think the window is getting smaller. Yeah, I tell you what, when the Lamb injury first happened, my first thought was that feels 6 weeks minimum, could be 2 months, could be more, who knows. It looks like it may be a 4-week injury, and Booker around the same track. I mean, would CeeDee Lamb return next week? I kind of doubt it, right? But he may be back at practice in limited fashion next week and may return the following week, which would be awesome, would be outstanding. Booker may have a good chance of returning next week, depending how things go, right? It's going to be a process, but the fact that they never even really seriously considered putting either guy on IR, in which case you'd have to miss at least 4 games, to me means the absolute maximum both these players are going to miss is 4 games, and they're probably only going to miss 3 games. Booker may only miss 2. That's kind of my feeling right now. We'll have to see how it all shakes out. But this is certainly good news for the Cowboys. Again, because CeeDee Lamb's an absolute superstar. Getting him back and getting the rookie back in Booker so he can get more playing time, that's going to be critical as well. So obviously in the short term, the injury news has just been a blast. It's just been a oh boy. For the Cowboys. But in the long term, it seems like they're starting to get some guys back in the Lamb and Booker situation and BB guys. I mean, I know he's been kind of lying under the radar because he's been on injured reserve, but this is going to be his 3rd week, right? Missing this week. So if you look at the long term, he's supposed to be a 5 to 6 week injury. He's going to be back in about 2-3 weeks as well. So again, the cavalry is coming for this offense. It's just, they've just been blasted with injuries so far this year. All right, this next report, I'll talk about more injury news. Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star has a latest timeline on DeMarvin and Overshown. I think he's making great strides and exceeding expectations in his recovery. I think he keeps moving the time clock forward. Yeah, there's been a bunch of reports on this. No idea when that is. I think everyone's still targeting Thanksgiving. I have no idea how that'll shift left to right. But man, getting Overshown back and getting just back into the flow, you talk about a spark plug, right? And even if he only plays 10 snaps a game, he doesn't have to be a star. Right, just getting his feet under him and feeling football again, right, and being healthy and just running around, kind of what the defense needs and kind of what the team needs. So you talk about a spark plug guy, an energy guy. That's what he was. People talk about the Dallas defense the second half of 2024 playing a little bit better at times. I know there were still a lot of duds mixed in there, of course, but a lot of that was Overshown. He was the energy. He was just this magnetic force of playmaking, just explosiveness. And if he can come back and just be that kind of pop in the huddle, pop in the locker room, and just get back and play 7, 8, 9, 10 snaps a game as he gets his feet underneath him, that would be a huge win for Dallas. And listen, if he's healthy, if he's good, the earlier the better. I am incredibly excited to see him play because Overshown's one of these guys. There are very few guys, I'm going to be totally honest, where I just tune in, and I know I watched all the Cowboys games. I'm sure you guys do as well, of course. They're just like, I want to see you play. Right, there's something about the way you play. Marion Barber was like this, the running back, right? Where you just like, I just want to see you play. I never got the feeling watching like Micah Parsons. Now he was great, of course. I just want to see him play, right? Overshown, I just want to see play. Just the way, the speed, the athleticism, the reckless abandon, the hustle. Like, I mean, it's a sight to see. So if he can come back and play and just be that spark plug, and we're talking a couple snaps a game. I do not want to put him under the fire too soon. But I tell you what, as a fan, I'm excited to see him return. And I'm sure the guys in the locker room are excited to see him return eventually. And boy, I bet Overshown's pumped too. And again, don't have to rush him back. Don't have to play him a lot. Just get him some activity, get him some energy, and get the locker room feeling the buzz he brings. That'd be a great sign for this team. Again, for the long term. All right, let's get to this post here from Nick Jacobs, who's a Chiefs reporter. And I'm just highlighting this to circle back to some commentary on PFF, Pro Football Focus, who's always seems to be in the news these days with their grades. Nick Jacobs commented, another bite that was interesting from Thursday. Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo weighs in on PFF grades. As Spagnuolo said, listen, I don't understand how they can grade people. Like, I don't know how they do it. I mean, he basically was kind of nice about saying, yeah, I appreciate the fact that they're trying to do something, but there's no way their grades are even close to accurate because I think they were commenting on Chris Jones, the Chiefs all-pro defensive tackle, had like a bad grade, and Spagnuolo was like, no, he had an awesome game, right? What are you talking about? And I do think that's an important problem PFF has run into. When PFF first started, I always thought it was one of those good things to figure out if there are good players on bad teams, right? Because sometimes you got a receiver, for example, who's always open, who's running great routes, but you really don't know because his team is bad for whatever reason. Or you've got a corner that locks down, a receiver all the time, but he's on a bad team, right? So he doesn't get the attention. I always thought that was the point of PFF, right? But now it seems PFF has really shifted in terms of how they grade and evaluate. Now it seems instead of being like additional information, they want to be the news. And I understand it's part of a growing business, it's part of the evolution of their brand, and I get that. But I think they're trending in a bad direction because a lot of their grades now, I feel like they're trying to, it's almost like trying to engage people to engage. Like, oh my goodness, this player that's not very good has a really high PFF grade. Ooh, this player, Chris Jones, for example, who's an all pro. Ooh, he had a really low PFF grade. What's the story here, right? I feel like that's more what they're either intentionally or not, that's what they're doing. I think it's actually intentional. Because if you look at their grades on a year-by-year basis, they're so all over the map. They're so inconsistent. For example, the best run defense team, I'm just picking up something here, in 2023 may have had a grade as a team of 90, and the best run defense team in 2024 may have a grade of 80. And you're like, well, hold on, how does being the best drop 10 points, which is massive, year to year? How does that happen? How does the best run defense team in 2023 and the best run defense team in 2024 be significantly different? That just doesn't make any sense. One of the things I actually posted this on X I thought was interesting is according to PFF, if you look at their college football rankings, Michigan Wolverines quarterback Bryce Underwood, the last 4 games has graded out with a 60.0 run blocking grade, that exact same score all 4 games. I said, how does this happen? How do you grade out exactly the same all 4 games? It doesn't even make any sense, right? So right now at PFF, I think they're, I used to cite them a lot. I still think they're a decent resource, but so far this season, I think they've really faltered with a lot of what they're doing, and we're starting to see a lot of people, a little more scrutiny, realize, hey, they're shifting their focus. So instead of providing more information for fans about little known players or players that are good that just aren't getting the attention, they're kind of just trying to be the news. And I think we're seeing, because of that, some really iffy decisions made by the graders over at Pro Football Focus. All right. Let's get into the comments here. Let's get started with member comments. Like I always say, I will always prioritize member comments. I will get to every member comment first and every single member comment before I get to the regular comment. So if you want to support the channel and you always want to get a shout out, make sure you become a member. I greatly appreciate it. There's a link in the description box below. But without further ado, let's jump into the comments. This is from Plague Doctor, talking about yesterday about just sort of where the team is at, where it's been in the past. He commented, yeah, what has killed me as a Cowboys fan has been all the self-inflicted losses we've had through bad clock management and undisciplined play. Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, as I say. I see none of that with Shoddy. I see motion and innovative plays. Motion may seem like a small thing, but it makes a defense play you more honest. They just can't see you from the go and just knowing what play you're coming with. Believe me, I know. If I know as a fan, then the defensive coordinator getting millions of dollars for his job definitely knows. Yeah, I will say this. The motion, the shifting, the creative schemes, night and day from Garrett and McCarthy. Night and day. Kellen Moore did some of it, but even this is just night and day, which is huge. I will say this. I feel like under Shoddy, there's a definite vision, smart application of discipline, and I genuinely root for him. I remember how good of a coach his dad was, and I want Shoddy to get a ring for him with this organization. If he does succeed, I won't question that he did everything that he could to succeed. I do with JG, Jason Garrett, and McCarthy. I feel like they could have done far more with the talent they had. I kind of worry about you being on X for this channel. That's funny. You're too logical and don't rage bait enough. That's fair. I mean, I'm not very good at that kind of thing. But yeah, it couldn't hurt to test the waters for a Gamecast or two. Yeah, I'll probably get there eventually. Won't happen this weekend. I just got a lot of work to other stuff going on, unfortunately. But I'll probably get there. I'll probably try and do you guys. Let me ask you this: is there some X accounts that do some good game day posting that you kind of would feel like are the model? If there is one, put it in the comment section below, and I'll see what they do, because I don't want to just go out there. I don't know what people are looking for on this kind of thing, right? That's like I would never be on posting X during a game ever. It's not something that would ever cross my mind. I know a lot of people do it. I'm not hating on anyone that does it. It's just not something that I would do. But if there is someone that does a good job, I'm all ears to learn how they do it. But in terms of the content here, yeah, I think I agree with you. With Jason Garrett, Wade Phillips, and Mike McCarthy, I always felt like the team was at X, and they performed always at like 90% of X. And I felt like there were so many wasted years. I know I harped on it in the past, but boy, you look at 2007, 2009, 14, 16, 21, 22, right, of teams that could have legitimately, I mean, those were legitimate championship teams, all of those teams, no doubt about it. 2007 was more championship offense, 2009 was more championship defense, 2014. I mean, imagine this 2014 squad, guys. I think about this sometimes, and it absolutely blows my mind. So when the Cowboys walked up to the line of scrimmage and they came out and everyone put their hands in the dirt, you had literally first ballot Hall of Famer left tackle, Okay, you had first ballot Hall of Famer right guard. You had an All-Pro, probably could have been a first ballot Hall of Famer eventually, Travis Frederick, right? You had an Offensive Player of the Year Pro Bowl running back. You had two other solid starters on the offensive line. You had an All-Pro quarterback in his prime, a first ballot Hall of Famer at tight end, an All-Pro wide receiver, and one of the best slot receivers in football, and a pretty good big play guy in Terrence Williams. Guys, it's like I'm describing the 1993 Cowboys, right? Now, were they quite as good? Maybe not, but they were the same ballpark. That 2014 squad was that good, and 2016 was similar. And to get out of that, I mean, look, you saw it. They go 12-4 and then 13-3, right? Winning the division both years, number one seed in 2016, and to have those seasons end the way they ended, that's on Jason Garrett. That's on Linehan. That's on Marinelli, right? There's a reason Jason Garrett hasn't gotten other coaching jobs, even as an offensive coordinator, right? I know he was the OC for the Giants for like a day, okay, and since then nothing. There's a reason. Linehan, Marinelli, a lot of those coaches, right? Callahan's probably the one example because he's a really good offensive line coach. Outside of that, right? Remember Chris Richard was supposed to be an up-and-coming defensive mind? What happened to him? Right? And I'm not trying to pick on the coaches. They know more about football than I do, and it's not even close. So they're obviously very, very smart people. But there's a reason those Cowboys underperformed, and it's because their coaching staffs, in my opinion, the coaching staff didn't put them in good positions to win. Didn't come up with those schemes that you mentioned, those strategies that you mentioned. People want to blame Jerry Jones, and the buck stops with him. He hired these guys. That's the fault of Jerry Jones. I think the biggest sin of Jerry Jones, certainly this decade or this century, I'll say it like this, was the hiring of Jason Garrett and sticking with Garrett, right? And part of that was also Wade Phillips. The Wade Phillips hiring was keeping Garrett on the roster as a coaching assistant to eventually hire him, and then for him to go with Jason Garrett as the head coach and to stick with him as long as he did. It's so frustrating to me. If they would have fired him after the third straight 8-8, I know it's tough to do that, and would have brought in a Schottenheimer-esque kind of guy, the Cowboys have a ring. I can guarantee that, right? It's so frustrating to me that when I look back historically, how good those teams were. I mean, we're talking not like Pro Bowl players, not like some All-Pro guys, but literally an offensive line that had, like when Jason Witten was down in his stance, they had 3 first-ballot Hall of Famers up front, and another guy who probably could have been if it weren't for injury, an All-Pro running back, an All-Pro wide receiver, and the franchise quarterback. I mean, there are teams that build their entire, seriously, the Detroit Lions are almost at that level. They're right about that level now, and they've been waiting 60, 70 years to get there, right? The Lions last had this thing in remotely close to 1957, right? It's been 70 years. The Detroit Lions are finally around that conversation of having talent. I don't even think they're as good as that 2014 Cowboy squad, but at least close to it, right? And now it's a magical for them. The Cowboys had that for the second time in 20 years, and they got nothing. I mean, they won a lot of games, but they got no championships out of it. No Super Bowl even appearances. And that, to me, is the great sin of Jerry Jones and of this Cowboys century, those teams. And I think Schottenheimer, I agree with everything you said there. I don't know if it'll be enough to win, but I do look back at the contrast of years prior and say, they got 80, 90% of what they could have. With Schottenheimer, I feel like they're going to get pretty close to 100%, maybe even a little bit more than they could have, which is what you need from the coach. All right, let's get into some more member comments. This next one is from Robert Bass, 3667. Nick, another super quality reporting. Hoping we don't stack too many losses in the last half of the season, maybe a healthy team and knowing new schemes. Who knows, might sneak into postseason. Yeah, it's so hard to tell, right? There are teams that start slow that get into the playoffs. There are teams that start really hot. They miss the playoffs. It happens every single season. Cowboys aren't beat up, undeniably so. New scheme across the board. I do think the long-term improvement is there for Dallas. But again, it's one of those things I said going into the year, even with my comparisons, I said, listen, it's going to be one of those years where, they're going to be feisty and competitive. I just don't see them as a playoff team. They're building for 26 and 27, but we'll see what happens, right? It's a long season. Anything, of course, can happen. Jamal Haltom, 5712, commented, you always provide gems, much like the running game changes. I think this is the first offense that Dak has been in where schemes allow people to open up and don't rely on the talent of Cooper, Lamb, and Gallup. We've been basically trying to run the Air Coryell to some extent since the 90s, and that's a talent-based offense. These changes will enable us to be a little bit more economical on offense and still achieve success. See the 49ers as an example. That said, I still believe you have to sign Pickens. If Pickens keeps us up, certainly. But I do agree with you that, listen, basically going back to 2018, 2019, ever since they traded for Amari Cooper, from 2018 to basically 2024, the Cowboys just tried to win on talent alone, right? And it was just, again, whether it was Kellen Moore, Mike McCarthy, or Jason Garrett and Linehan, they just said, hey, we've got good players, right? Let's just try and win with those guys. Let's just throw them out there, roll the footballs out and see what we do. And look, when you play, that's when the Cowboys were able to get so many blowouts, by the way, because if you just play with talent and you have better talent than the other guys, then the opposing coaching staff, they can't do anything, right? Like, they're just better, right? It's like when Alabama or Ohio State, right, beats up on an FCS opponent, right? It's like, they just have more talent. Right? It doesn't matter what the coaches do. Just roll the footballs out and you win by 40, right? The Cowboys had some of those blowouts. The problem is once you get into somewhat competent teams with even close to a subtle baseline of close to that same baseline of talent, you run it. Your gap to exploit goes away, and then you're just stuck. You don't have a scheme. You don't have a process to overcome that. The Cowboys right now are at least implementing a process, and I think it's a great sign for them going forward if they can successfully implement. On offense, it looks like they're on the right track. Defense, long way to go. All right, Ray Cooley, 4896 commented, up until now, I liked your podcast. Oh, I'm sorry. But when you said Deuce Vaughn was a disaster, I was shocked. Deuce never got a fair shot. I think it's one of those things. I know Vaughn had his fans, but he had, 40 carries in the NFL regular season, and he averaged less than 3 yards per carry. Look, I know he wasn't put in the best of situations, and I get it, and there's a lot of people that felt he needed more opportunities. He had the flashes in the preseason and training camp. But the reality is, if you have 40 carries in the National Football League, and there was, a lot of snaps. He caught, I think, 10 passes for 60 yards. He, had some pass pro snaps. He had a lot of snaps. He had a lot of film, right? And there's a reason that after the Cowboys released Deuce Vaughn, no one lined up to sign him, right? I think he got, a tryout with the Broncos. He may be on the practice squad. I don't even think he's on the practice squad. He just the reality is it sucks. He was a great college player, just couldn't translate to the National Football League. It's one of those things that just happens. I don't mind the Cowboys taking a flyer on him because you never know. You have these great college players that can translate despite some, deficiencies in their game or deficiencies with their measurables. Deuce Vaughn just wasn't one of them. Maybe me saying a disaster is probably a little harsh, and I think that's probably wrong on me to do that, and I'll accept that. But he's just not an NFL player, or at least hasn't been up to this point. I hope he changes it. I hope he turns around. Hope he finds a home and does great things. Right? I'm rooting for Deuce Vaughn. I'm not rooting against Vaughn. I just think he just wasn't good for Dallas, and currently just isn't an NFL running back. And again, I hope that changes. I just think that's just the reality. You average less than 3 yards per carry. That's just not good, guys. Glenart 101 commented, would be good to see the single pie chart put into a stacked bar chart for the last 5 years, talking about the salary cap allocation pie chart I mentioned yesterday. The defense is suffering from the fact they're dealing with their third defensive coordinator in 3 years, no continuity. That is absolutely important, and that is a great factor to bring into. Glenn goes on to say, then you start slinging in first and second year players into the secondary, and that's true, right? You've got, you got guys like Reddy Stewart playing a lot of football, for example, right? And they're going to get some issues. Even though Reddy Stewart's been playing pretty good. I look at more of the first year players, like maybe linebacker, some of these guys on defensive end and things like that. But I think the lack of continuity is a serious issue, right? And when you don't have that continuity and then you try and play team defense, right? It's like a basketball team, right? It's one of those things when Team USA gets together from Olympic basketball or things like that, one of the problems they run into, and they blow out a lot of teams, but one of the reasons they have some troubles, they never live up to their talent, by the way. USA basketball is obviously very good, but based on their talent, they should beat everybody by 50. The question is, why not? Why don't they? It's because they don't play as a team. And it's not because of a fault of their own. It's because you've got all these star players that are playing as a team with the NBA, with their NBA teams, because they've been working together for months or years and years and years, and they're playing against Olympic teams, France, Spain, whatever, that for the most part play as a team and have been playing as a team going back a long time. And continuity matters, right? It matters whether you're playing as a team in basketball. It matters if you're trying to play team defense in the NFL, or team offense too, for that matter. And it's one thing if you're playing a lot of man coverage, and then it becomes just 11 one-on-one games, right, essentially. And that's what they were under Dan Quinn, and they kind of did some of that under Zimmer as well. But Eberflus, to his credit, and I think this is the right approach, is you got to play more as a team, right? Much like having that scheme is something you have to do on offense, because if you just try and win with talent alone, that only goes so far. You need team defense to win in the National Football League, because eventually, if you just play 11 one-on-one matchups, you'll play against a team that has as good a talent as you, or most likely better, right? And we saw it with Dallas in the postseason numerous occasions. We saw that in Dallas in big games on numerous occasions against good teams. The 49ers always seem to wreck Dallas, right? The Bills wrecked Dallas in 23, Packers in the playoff game, for example. So you got to switch in that team defense. But the lack of continuity, I think, is a real problem. And hopefully over the course of the season, they'll improve. And maybe over multiple seasons, we'll see some continuity build, and this team will trend in the right direction. All right, next comment here is from Hugo _L-
07R, trade Diggs and get picks for his trade or players. I just think his contract's a little, not conducive to that. Maybe they will. It's more likely if they move on from Diggs. I'm not saying they will or won't. It will be a release through the offseason to open up cap space so then they can go sign a player, right? That's the more likely path if they move on from Diggs. I don't think a team will trade for him this season. But you do bring up an interesting point, right? If, let's say, Revel comes back and he's looking good in practice, and, if someone's willing to just trade for Diggs and give up a lot for him, do you take that deal? It's a call I take. I'll just say it like that. Christopher Lentz 5008 said, I think they should continue to play lots of zone early this season to get it figured out. They already know how to play man. Later on, when the defensive ends start getting a bit more pressure and the cornerbacks get healthy, then mix in the man coverage. It's a good point, right? If you're developing for the long term, right, you got to go through the lumps. And, if they can figure it out and then switch and add more man later, whether it's this season or in following seasons, that can be a powerful combination. I do think the one problem that, and I mentioned this before, is that if you're so bad in zone coverage that you can't evaluate how players are playing in zone, right? If you can't communicate in zone and you have guys running wide open, how do you evaluate how good you are? How do you evaluate how good your pass rushers are if there's a coverage breakdown and guys open half a second into the route for a huge play down the field, right? How do you evaluate if one of your linebackers can rally to the football and tackle if your safety and corner miscommunicate, give up a 60-yard play? That's the only problem. If it hurts the evaluation of players and situations, then it becomes a problem. But if you can get it cleaned up to the point where the disaster plays are few and far between, and you can start evaluating players, then I agree with everything you said there. Then yes, full speed ahead with their plan. Final comment here is from Tracy-Z9P6P. Why do people keep talking about Overshown? He is very good when he plays, but he hasn't proven he can stay healthy. How many regular season games has he played in? Last question there. The answer is not a lot, but boy, he is a spark plug, like I mentioned before, when he does play. And I'm excited to see him play. And I think that's why people talk about Overshown, because he's just one of these guys, right? You just put him in the game and good things happen. And it reminds me a little, Tyrann Mathieu, the safety who played a long time in the National Football League, right? Obviously, people like to say, oh, Sean Lee, obviously the great linebacker before he got hurt. I think he's more Overshown, honestly, is what Overshown in terms of the potential of Overshown and what we've seen him do for the Cowboys in the limited amount of playing time was actually what people were hoping Jalen Smith could be, the former linebacker for Dallas out of Notre Dame. Jalen Smith just never became a good player, unfortunately. And I think one good season and just never could live up to it. It was just such an unfortunate thing, probably with the injuries. Overshown, very similar kind of strategy there in terms of what he could become and what he already was with Smith if he can stay healthy. And I think Overshown, again, I just like him too much as a spark plug. There's certainly some bias there, but if he can be what his potential showed last season and stay healthy, he's a special player on this team, a special player on this defense. And listen, you got to be optimistic, right? If you're down in the dumps and you're negative, like, this guy hasn't played very much, he's too injury prone, you may be right. And it may turn out to be that way. But listen, I don't like to think that way. I like to think, hey, listen, Overshown, he's got a bright future. He's working hard. He's going to live his NFL dreams. He's going to be a player in the National Football League. He may not be, right? You may be 100% correct. But I'm going to try and be positive about it because guess what? You know who else is positive about it? DeMarvion Overshown. And until he's done, I don't think we should be done as fans and followers of the Cowboys as well. All right, that's all the comments to get to today. A lot of stuff all over the place today when it comes to the news. We're looking into an exciting weekend of college football today, so I'm sure a lot of you guys will tune into that. And very interesting weekend of NFL games as well. I think the Cowboys obviously really, really beat up, going to really test their depth in a lot of different places. It's going to present a lot of challenges come Sunday. But listen, we'll see what happens, and there'll be more news to come, I'm sure, over the next 24 hours as the Cowboys get prepared for the Week 5 opponent. And until tomorrow, when we'll talk again, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.